Let's finish up by talking about exporting our geometry and maps from ZBrush. So when you finish with your model, a lot of times you'll want to get it out for production, right? So you want to incorporate it into your animation and maybe another application. So to do that, we'll want to have a mesh that is of an appropriate resolution that we can use also with the correct topology for animation so that it deforms properly. So in this case, we'll probably want to use a lower subdivision level, so maybe 1 or 2 in this case. So to get the geometry out, we can go in the tool palette up to export, and that will allow us to export an OBJ of that geometry, and the UVs will come along with it just fine. We can also use GoZ to send the geometry over to whatever application we happen to be using, Maya, 3ds Max, Moto, Cinema 4D, and so you can choose those programs and then send that over using the GoZ button. Okay, or you can export it. You can also go to the Subtool Master and do an export there as well. If you just do a regular export, it will be just the subtool that you have selected. So it would be just this body, but you can go in and actually do an export of all the visible subtools as well. So that can kind of speed things up, especially if you have a lot of different subtools. Now we talked about getting the maps out. So once you have the geometry out, you probably also want the texture out. And the texture, you do want to be the high resolution texture. So you want to go up to the highest level and then come down to texture map. And we kind of talked about this, but you go to create and you want to create new from polypaint. And that'll create a texture, a UV based texture based on the polypaint data that you have. Now, I didn't mention it before, but you can also go backwards. So if you have a model that just has a texture and you want to start painting on it in ZBrush using polypaint, all you have to do is load the texture up. And you would load it in the texture palette and then choose it from here. And then you can go to polypaint and say polypaint from texture, and that will take all the texture-based detail, UV-based detail, and bake it down into a polypaint that will be contingent on the resolution of your model. So you want to make sure that it is high enough resolution to contain all of that detail. So once you have your texture map, you can clone it and then export it from the texture palette up here. Okay. The normal map is going to be what allows you to get this high resolution look and sort of a fake bump on your low resolution mesh. So to do that, you'll go to normal map and you actually have to calculate it. So we can go create normal map. It tells you that it can't do it on the high resolution, and that's true. So we need to go down to the lower resolution, and you want to go down to whichever level you're going to be using as your base. Okay, and what it's going to do is look at the high resolution and look at the low res, kind of make a map that's to be applied to the low res that will give you the illusion of the detail in the high res. So we'll go create normal map. It's going to be sort of a blue map here, and then you can see the detail in there that when applied will allow you to get the look of that low resolution. And again, you can export that out, or if you do GoZ, those maps will come along for the ride automatically. Okay, so in this case, pretty straightforward. We're using a lower level as our production mesh, and then we are reproducing the high resolution detail via the use of a texture map and a normal map, which are both based on the UVs that we created for this guy. So that's where the UVs come in really handy. They enable us to apply those textures, get this guy working in our short film or whatever it is that we happen to be working on. Okay, so over the last hour and a half or so, we've gone through the process of just doing a quick project all the way through in ZBrush. Now, ZBrush is a really complex application. There's lots and lots of tools that you can use that are actually really, really cool and allow you to get some really cool effects. So if you're interested in continuing on, I'd encourage you to check out the introduction to ZBrush. And then we have lots of different courses that are based on particular aspects of ZBrush, and then lots of project-based courses where you can just look at it and say, oh yeah, I want to make that character, or I want to make this thing, and you can go through and make it. Okay. The idea with this was just kind of get you going on one project as soon as possible, kind of give you some confidence in knowing that you can do it, and kind of get you exposed to some of the things here that we can do in ZBrush. But if you want to dive into kind of more in-depth about how ZBrush works, the interface, how the canvas works and pixels and things like that, I'd encourage you to check out the introduction to ZBrush. So I hope you've enjoyed this first day in ZBrush. Good luck on your second day and beyond. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later.